Hi, hello. Nice to see you again and wonderful to meet you and discuss your films and particularly the film Infinite Happiness. I would like to present Ila Becca and Louise Lemoine, who made until now, I thought it was 20 films, but discovering that it's growing and growing by the minute.
Yeah, it's 1,000 now.
1,000 films by now. They're making films as they are breathing, actually.
Absolutely, more than that.
And yes, and now they're in Venice and in a quarantined city. And unlike us, their kids haven't visited school for 4 months, and they don't have a second wave of corona. They're still in the first wave, and
yeah, not already.
I think your situation is better than ours. What film are you going to present in the Real Doc Aviv in September? You want to say a few words about it?
Yeah, actually, we are very happy because Doc Aviv, we have a long history with Doc Aviv showing many films, and it's a real pleasure to feel that there is a continuous interest. And it will happen in a second on our door too. So this year, we are happy to show a film that we shot in Japan. And we actually have a series of films shot in Japan because we spent there a certain period of time. It's sort of, we have revisited a bit the road movie typology. And it's a film entirely shot in a car, in a vintage Alfa Romeo, of one of the leading figure in architecture today. It's the partner of Sana. It's Ryu Nishizawa, and with whom we have a very friendly relationship because we made a couple of years or 3 years ago Moriyama-san, that you may have seen. And so after this film, shot in his architecture in Tokyo, we wanted to follow up and to do something out of the relationship we have with him. And he's passionate by old cars, and he has this fantastic Alfa Romeo, and we made a sort of urban drift through Tokyo and it's a personal journey of his through his memories, places he likes, the Tokyo he knows, and so he brings us through the city.
Sounds fascinating. I'm sure the public of architects will be really interested in it. I'm expecting to see it myself. But before you made this film, or I don't know, maybe in parallel, I would like to ask you a little about your series Homo Urbanus, because after making several films on single buildings, famous architectural pieces, in the past couple of years you have been working on a series on cities, actually exploring cities in what we are familiar with as the third world. I wanted to ask you about the transition from making films about single buildings, famous architectural pieces, to cities.
Actually, we can say that there's no big transition because we always film the people in architecture, and now it's people in architecture in the city. So it's we are just filming people, but and the relation they have with the urban environment. So now it's the scale is larger, so it's the city, but we are not really interested in a city or in another city. We are interested in how we live within the cities. Our relationship with the other people, with the other our body, with the body of the other people. So how we share the space in a urban environment. This is because we would like to understand why we built cities, like this, and we passed our time struggling with this space. So it's not really the best place to be a city, because there's a lot of people and there's not enough of space, and there's a lot of problem. And so we are interested in this struggle, the struggle about our bodies and the space of the cities. So we filmed until now 10 films in 10 different cities, but at the end, if you see the films together, all the films together, you understand that is not really about the city, but it's really about the condition of the human being.
The condition of it.
Yeah, it's about this. We are really interested in this.
About the Homo urbanus.
It's the Homo, we call it Homo urbanus. So it's this kind of human being that is living in artificial conditions, not in nature.
So for you, it's a continuation. You're interested in the condition of the human being towards the city, towards the architecture, and instead of focusing on buildings, you're focusing on cities. But still, at least in the mode of production, there must be a big difference when you focus on a singular building and when you work with an architect. I will relate to it in my further question. Maybe then you can relate to the difference, because my next question is about Infinite Happiness. It was made in 2015, and it all was shot, I'm just speaking now for the people who haven't watched the film, it was all shot in the model housing designed by the famous Danish architect Bjerke Ingels in the outskirts of Copenhagen, and it's considered a great success, at least as far as I know. It is described in your own website as a Lego game that builds up a collection of stories all connected to your relation to the building, some kind of a personal film diary that is based on the experience of architecture. So please just, if you can describe how you have worked on that film, how did you choose the site? How did you conceive of and develop the concept? Do you have a relation with the architect? Did you choose the site for a particular reason? How did you do it? Can you say a few words about it?
Let's say that it's a project that started with an invitation to be part of an exhibition on the studio of Bjerke Ingels on Big. We had an art commission to make a film on this building, but with the total freedom of treatment, of point of view, etc. And it's interesting. Actually, in our personal evolution and way of working in architecture film, it was an interesting, this shooting happened in an interesting moment, because just before we worked in the Barbican in London. We made the film just about a couple of months just before. And so for us, it was extremely interesting to make the film in the 8 House. That was a building that had less than 5 years, I think. So very, very recent building with a very recent and young community on almost, not in the city, on the outskirts of Copenhagen, so almost in a wild landscape, etc. So conditions very, very different from the very urban environment in which the Barbican sits, and also with the long history the Barbican has behind, and the typology of architecture, etc. So we, in both films, we really asked ourselves to the film how architecture is able to create a sense of community, how architecture encourages human connections within the building, etc. How architecture is able to invite social life, etc. And from London, from the Barbican and to the 8 House, obviously, the answers were extremely different. So we were very interested in this articulation. So we like also to present films in a certain related way. So in terms of methodology, we applied also the same type of methodology, which was basically a full immersion within the life of the building. We asked to live inside, and a very nice Danish family left their flat to let us live inside for 1 month.
For 1 month, yes.
Yeah, it was, it's short, but at the same time rather intense, and we managed to make everything within that constraint. And the principle was very simple. It was sort of how the film can build up a sort of social portrait of the building through a series of glimpses, because the film is built up, as a lot of our previous films, made by very short stories, very short fragments, if you want, video fragments. And so you go through one interior to another, and one scene to another, and at the end of the film you get a sort of global sense of it, thanks to all these moments shared with inhabitants.
You also have that nice structure, the structure of the building that shows each time where you are filming. It's something that is also in the Barbican. You have it in other films, and it's very beautiful. It works artistically wonderfully with the shots, and it seems like you have created some sort of a solution how to show the structure. Show the structure and show the pieces of the structure at the same time. It seems like there's an architectural thinking involved in the making of this film.
We try everything. We try to find a way to be very free to film what we want without explaining anything. So this is a way to just to, at the beginning of each fragment or each chapters, to say, okay, we were there, but now forget it. Let's see what's happening in that place. So it's not because we don't want to, during the film, we don't want to explain anything about the architecture, about where we are, about the orientation, about
everything. No background.
Yeah, it's just a way we explore every film. With everything, we explore a way to be really to free off all this kind of information, to concentrate only on the situation and the relationship we have with the people that we meet. It's just a way to say, okay, this was there, and now let's see what is happening about the event or the ordinary event that is happening in the place.
So it's true that each time when we build up at the editing phase our films, which are very fragmented, we try to find a structural element that allows to create a coherence in the narration, a coherence within this fragmentation. And for instance, Barbicania is built up around the idea of the diary. So it's the evolution of time, and it's the counting of days that we spent there that structures the film. And in The Infinite Happiness, it's actually a logic, it's not even logical, but it's a spatial structure. So you have this this model of the building, and so each time it's almost like in a book, as if you had like a head of chapter in the book, and you locate yourself very specifically in the building, and then we are, as Ila said, very free to bring you and to drift somewhere in the life of someone. But it's true that it's one element that we wanted to keep in order to get to keep an eye on the architectural reading of the film, because you can read it in various ways, but thanks to that presence or silent presence of architecture, it helps us to have this architectural reading too.
It gives orientation also. I would like to invite our listeners to post questions in the Q&A, and it's open to questions. You can print your questions. We will read them. We will refer to them. Okay. For now, I will go to my next question. In general, I can say that your films are different from the common film on architecture, if there is such a convention at all. The way you portray architecture is very different from how architects would choose to portray their works, I think. And however, there is much respect and understanding of architectural experience. Also, another difference that I find in your works is it's very different from other documentaries. It's like, Ila, you said that we don't want to give any background. Many documentaries have overt social and political agendas that sometimes overshadow their artistic choices. Your artistic choices are very highly distinguishable in the works. The sensitivity, the aesthetics of the architecture, the aesthetics of film. I'm sure it is a choice, and maybe you can say something about this choice. I mean, you mentioned it previously. Maybe you can say a little more about this choice.
Yeah, I don't know if our film are so different, but it's true that from the beginning we wanted to make, as we chose to make film about space, architecture, space, and cities. It's not cinema, so it's not in the conventional world that we know very well, because we made film before for let's say the cinema system, the cinema system, and we know very well that it's complicated to change some formats, because you need to go inside some regulation in order to have some funds for your film, because the film are very expensive. So like scripts or storyboards or things like this, and also a way to narrate the story also, no? We were very happy to start making film in the architecture world, because it's totally free, because no one is asking you why you do like this film. It's not because they don't mind, because in architecture
so there's no convention.
No, there's no convention, because
you don't work with TV, for instance.
Because we don't work with TV, we don't work with funds, we are totally free. So we say, why reproduce a system that we don't need all of this? We can make films totally free, so let's try to make film as we want. And from the beginning, the as we want, it was working as our memory works in our head. So not like a normal film that you have a beginning, a development, and a happy end. It's better, but not in that way. But just we wanted just to reproduce how we have memories in our head. So in our head we have little spot of memories, little images, a lot of images, but not related by the story. So we said, okay, let's just film our experience inside a place and reproduce the system in cinematographically in just a collection of fragments, like our memory is constructed. And see, this is from the beginning. Our first film, Kolas Hazard, is constructed like this. It's structured like this. It's just a series of little fragments that you can change the order. And we did it, because the final film that you can see now is just the end of 200 tests of changes the order of all these fragments. And so from the beginning we say, okay, let's totally change. And it was for us very funny to make this, and very free, because watching the parallel system of the cinema, we say, wow, we have a lot of freedom on doing this. So let's go further. Let's see what is happening. And with our last project, that is Homo Urbanus, we talked before about the cities, about the space in the cities. This is much more fragmented than the other films, because the other film, they have a structure, and this film, the fragment is very, very short, and there's a collection of many short fragments, all put it all together, creating a sort of
visual narration.
Yeah, it's a visual narration, how we have in our mind. So we are really working a lot in the similarity of the structure of our film and the structure of our memory.
But I see that in the chat there is a question that maybe relates to...
Yeah, there are several questions, but yeah, you can select. You want to answer specifically?
Because it was just related to what Hila said initially regarding the funding. It's an interesting question, because definitely it determines also how we work and how and the aesthetic, everything a bit.
The question is how do you find your films, right?
Yeah. Fund the films. Let's say that it evolved a lot, and it was a very complicated question. Initially, actually, the very first film, Colas House Life, we made it only the two of us as a sort of holiday project with absolutely no budget and nothing, just by pure will to experiment something, without with no idea that it could be developed and like become the matrix of 15 years of research. But so absolutely no fund, and only just time and the ability we have of making everything by ourselves. But then actually, as we didn't have like the normal profile to get like state normal cinema fund for those films, and in architecture there are no specific funds, or at least we didn't know at that time, specific funds for film related to architecture. We decided to become publishers, to publish ourselves our films under forms of a combination of film and of DVD and book, and actually under a very, very do-it-yourself kind of experimentation, and actually it went rather well. So the first title, Colas House Life, was it was a surprise because it worked really well. We did like we were publisher, distributor, etc., and we sold like how many? 20,000 copies. And so it was a rather expensive project, either for us, but also for the client. So it helped us to fund the next films. And this was a sort of experiment that we maintain over the first years, like and still today. But now our activity as a publisher has really reduced. But this was the start. We tried to make things on the other side, so to publish films and in order to fund the next ones. And then after a while, we started to get some sustain from museums and residencies for artists, etc. So
I can add that we discovered that maybe in the field of art and architecture too, there's a little bit more freedom than in cinema, because in the cinema, you have for looking for funds, you have to explain to a lot of people what you are doing with your film, what you will do with your film, what you are putting in your film. It's something we try at the beginning to ask some funds in the cinema system, but they ask us to write a script.
It rationalizes very much the process.
And they ask us to write a perfect script of the documentary that we are going to do. So we said we don't know, we improvise. No, you cannot improvise. we have to know what you're going to put inside. We don't know. We go there, just give us the money. We go there and we make the film. No, it's not working like this. No, you have to write everything, what you're going to film, which camera, how many people, or you have to pay all the people. So we know very well this kind of work, and it takes too much time. It's too long. It's too long. Yeah. You can have funds to make a beautiful film, but maybe in the same time you can make 10 horrible films. That's it. I think it's maybe 10 horrible films that's one beautiful film.
But this is such an important topic.
You learn much.
That probably it's a good, DocAviv could organize another webinar on the subject, because I think it's really important and interesting to understand.
And also, that I have to say another thing that's very interesting about the funding of films. I know a lot of people that wanted to make film in their life, and they don't make film because someone one day decided that they will not give funds for his film. So they depressed a lot, and they say, okay, it's enough, I don't want to make film, it's too complicated. So you depend from the other to have funds. You depend for the decision of other people, and other people, they decide not only in a context of quality. We don't know how they decide. No, maybe your film is fantastic. Maybe your project is a wonderful project, but they decide to give money, the funds to another one, and you depress. So I think maybe today it's possible to make films without a lot of funds. So you just try. What is very important is to make film that doesn't cost a lot. A film that doesn't cost a lot. If your film is very expensive, it's finished because you will spend your time to looking for funds. So how we found our film are not expensive, so we can do it, and we know how to do everything ourselves. So we do as a handcraft man.
Before we move on to more questions, which I have two more questions in the Q&A and another question in the chat, and I want all to be answered. I wanted to ask another one of my questions in filming Infinite Happiness, was Bjarke Ingels involved? What influence, if any, did his involvement had on your work, even if not a conscious one? Did you feel any obligation to represent him, his ideologies? Did you feel that it led you in any way, even in reverse way, of attempting to avoid it? How would you describe the relations between the architectural and the cinematic point of view, which is another question that also relates to the same question?
Do you think there's I don't think there's an ideology in our film. I think there's an ideology in Bjarke Ingels, but it's not. You cannot find it, I think, in our film. And one thing that was very important before making the film, what he asked to make a film about this building 5 or 6 years before that we made it. We said initially we said now we can make this film because there's no many people inside. It was just finished, the building, so we are interested in how people live in the building, and this is a very interesting building for us because it's a kind of a community, and is related to the history of communities in Denmark. And also we asked him to make the film obviously, as we do always, completely free, and we just asked to give him, because the film was made for an exhibition in the United States. We asked to give the film just 1 day before the opening.
So we could make no changes.
Yeah, no changes. The changes were not possible. And as he is a very intelligent person, he said, "Okay, I understand. It's okay. So let's do it like this." So we did the same thing with all the other films, and we realized that it's a good rule for have a lot of freedom.
But I think Bjarke, when he asked us to interest ourselves to the building, he knew already some of our films and liked the spirit. So I think he came in a voluntary way. He liked this challenge of being surprised, and even because he knew that we are particularly keen on introducing also questioning the building through also criticism that can appear from the point of view of some inhabitants, and it's the case in the film. Because of the excess of success of that building, in some ways, there is a sort of architectural tourism that has developed, and that creates some disturbance, or that disturbs quite a lot some of the inhabitants that are the most exposed. And so the idea is not to be positive or negative. The idea is really to get a realistic sense of what's happening and what are the burning issues, what is the spirit, etc. And what we try to do is to be as close as possible to that feeling we are perceiving in that community.
But speaking about the community, the community is not the issue. They're very much the issue in this film, and I feel that it's a film about the communal housing, but we feel the interaction between the people, but we don't really, in the sociological sense, you know, we don't really know a lot about the community. We don't know about the socioeconomic situation. It seems that you're not interested even in their private lives at all. You're only interested in the relations between them. So in that way, it's unique, and it's surprising that you chose not to relate at all to these questions. I must understand that it is a choice not to relate to the who are the people who live in this place? Are they rich? Are they poor? Are they middle class? How much does it cost to live in this place? How is it situated in the local setting of real estate of Copenhagen? These questions don't arise, don't appear at all. Immigrants, I mean, who is the community? This is a question that is not related to at all in the film, and I'm sure it is based on some sort of choice.
Let's say that the way we try to make films is always to suggest rather than to express clearly information. The information can arise in a sort of subtle and underground way, rather than being very clearly said, because we do not take there is no voiceover in the film, and so what is said by the people we meet, rather than you're not led by a sort of voiceover which explains you the setting, the environment, the social conditions, etc. So what we try to do is always to let the view to give a very active role to the spectator, in the sense that he is probably able through his experience to get information from what he sees. So, for instance, there is a chapter, I will call it like this, in this film, which is a sort of collection of interiors. And you go, it's in a static way, we make, it's almost like the elements of the 8 House in the Colas way. You see bedrooms, living rooms, yeah, because we were very interested in this sort of harmonious or almost monotonous way of furbishing apartments, which is very Nordic, in the Nordic style or IKEA influenced way.
Yes.
And which is interesting because it talks about that also harmonious social level of the inhabitants. Obviously, there are slight differences because you have apartments with extraordinary views and you have apartments with bigger than others, etc. But globally, obviously, it's a sort of middle class Danish community with a few foreigners, but I would say not mostly, because I think there was a sort of Italian community we didn't get to know very well, because at that time they were not there. Because a new railway was being built in the city, and they were calling Italians to build it. You remember? Mm-hmm. But otherwise, I think it's rather homogeneous Danish middle class environment. Yeah, rather young. But what they share is more an idea of a sort of what embodies this building is a sort of halfway. It's between private and public, because it's a evolution of the idea of community, in the sense that everyone lives on his own in a private space, but can share common spaces as they want, in the modality they want. And so there is a sort of invitation. The building offers this kind of, this invitation to be social. But if you prefer, you can also live this building in a very private way, not facing the pathway, and also not taking part to any activities, that inhabitants propose, etc. So there are many modalities to leave the building, but even architecturally speaking, the building offers or invites to share.
Yeah. So now I will go to the Q&A, and I think that the first question, is there any cooperation between you and the architects, and do architects take into account your point of view, your interpretation of the architectural outcome they're assigned on? I think we answered it, I think we answered it because I asked you directly about Bjerke Ingels. We have a question here. Which scenes, fragments were the most powerful to you? Which you wish you would have cut out during editing?
Which is the most fragment of the film?
Well,
personally, I like the animals, all the animals.
With the sheep.
yeah, yes. It was difficult to be understood. The connection with the man is difficult. Yes. I see it as a whole and not so much as one best. So I don't know what to say about my favorite or my best. Obviously, you know, the editing phase for us, it's the moment in which we build the film. So, and it's rather playful in the sense that we try in many ways. That's why in the brief we said it's almost like a Lego game, because we can build it in a sense and rebuild it in a totally different way. And so, but what we are trying to look for is a sort of harmony, or how all these little chapters dialogue together and create at the end this sense of globality. So I think they all need each other to build something up. They do not exist individually, but they really, they construct. It's almost an architectural project in some ways.
I also like the big hamburger sandwich at the end. So good.
Okay, the next question. Since you are observing people in space, do you have any new thoughts about future projects following the social distancing?
Project of our project.
A film about social distancing.
We during the lockdown we were not in Venice, but we wanted to film Venice during the lockdown, and so we asked some friends to take our cameras and go outside to film a little bit the city for us, and say, wow, let us know what is happening. So there's a friend that went out with our camera. He started to film a little bit. He asked permission and all the things. So, and he sent us the clips, the films, and we saw the film and say, wow, nothing's happening. Everything is completely empty. The city is like a dead city. And that was a very sad images, because and also very boring, because we just saw 2-3 minutes of the city like this. So we said, wow, there's nothing. So what are we going to film? And we saw a lot of films about cities during the lockdown everywhere in the world. And it was the same sensation, always the same sensation, extremely boring. So they try to make beautiful shots, because there's no life, so just beautiful shot of architecture. And we just thought about the beginning of when we start making film, and we said, oh, because we start talking about making a film about architecture, and the first thing that we said was, yeah, let's make a film about architectural space, but only with people inside, because otherwise we don't like, because normally the architecture is always filmed and photographed by with an empty space, so beautiful light, and so. So we said, wow, the city during the lockdown is like an apartment in a beautiful magazine, no? It's where everything is beautiful, but there's no people, there's no life, there's nothing. So it's a deadly image.
But actually, we have been running a course at the Architecture Association this year, and we had one of our students who made a film out of the lockdown experience. So we also monitored the project, etc., and oriented her, and she made everything from the inside, obviously, which was a more interesting point of view.
Yeah, obviously, you have to film inside, not outside.
Yeah. That would be interesting to see. So we have two questions from the chat now, which will be it's actually three questions from the chat now, which we will end this webinar with. One question is, why was it so crucial to establish yourself as tourists who can't speak Danish and making the people speak English? And what was behind the idea of revealing the crew behind the camera? This is from a filmmaker to a filmmaker.
But let's say that we didn't speak Danish at the time, and neither today. So there was no discussion about speaking Danish. And also, I think an important thing for us is, as far as in Denmark, everyone speaks very good English. Let's say that this is a very important element to understand. And it helps a lot. The idea of having a translator is not something we are so keen about, because it doesn't create a direct connection with the people. So it's very indirect and creates right away distance with the person, etc. So if in the case we have this opportunity to talk with the people directly, we do it, and in any language we can speak. On both sides. Yeah, and the idea of showing the crew behind the camera is also linked to the same idea. Is what we have been trying to do through all our films is really to transform into an aesthetic, also the constraints, the production constraints, which are making films with a very small budget, as we said initially, and so to get the more intimacy we can, in the sense that to really make personal films, because we don't have like a big crew behind. It's like a very small size, and this size in the way we work implies this ability to connect with the people in a very intimate way. And so that's why we also wanted to speak at first person. It's really to create that intimacy.
And the last question is, thank you. The last question is actually related to Homo Urbanus, and in which you moved throughout cities, throughout 6 cities or 7 cities. And
10.
10. It's not even all on your website. You have 10 cities.
We are going faster than our website.
So have you managed to think or conceive of the role or challenge of architects and urban designers for the new cities, for the mega cities? Is there a way you can conceive of it?
Maybe I can answer, because actually I'm an architect also, and after all my studies, I don't think today that the architects can decide things so big, bigger than them. I think the architects can do beautiful things in a small scale, so a building or 2 buildings or 3 buildings, but not in the scale of the city. The scale of the city is decided by other balances, by other powers, and I think it's a politics that decide, and not all the politics, not all the politics, is the economy that decide about the city. the city has been built because of an economic interest, and also when the cars arrived, the city completely changed because we needed a place to transportation and to go very fast because of the economy. So I think the architects can help to give a quality, but they cannot transform the city. They cannot decide to build a new city because an architect always needs a client. An architect could not build a building alone, no, or a city alone. You need a client. A client is at the end. The bottom line is the client that decides how to do things. You can propose, but it's not you. You're not deciding.
But anyway, I think, yeah, it can bring quality, of course. And I think just to say a few words of what we are doing with this laboratory at the Architectural Association in London, it's a bit what, in the way we could answer to the question in this way, in the sense that what we are trying to do with future architects, which are these students in 4th and 5th year in diploma unit, it's maybe through the observation of the existent, through the observation of the struggle Ila was talking about in the city, through the observation of very minute and small details of our daily life in those environments. What we try to work on with our students is really to refine their sensitivity, to listen, to observe, to see what are really the subjects that matters, rather than just looking for aesthetics and looking for, like, you know, the signature of the architects. Really to understand from the observation of your daily environment, what needs, how through rooted and grounded observation you can answer to all these issues.
Thank you very much. It was a lovely session. I found it very interesting. I hope the listeners enjoyed. Thank you, Ila and Louise. I hope to see you in September in Israel.
We hope to.
And
yeah,
to see the film, and I suggest to everybody to come and see the film and all the films in this DocuStream session. Thank you, and
thank you.
And good night, good afternoon.
Bye, Liat.
Bye-bye. Bye.